Welcome to the Hembury Books Podcast. Today, our guest is Amra Pajalić. Amra is an award-winning author, an editor and teacher who draws on her Bosnian cultural heritage to write own voice stories for young people who, like her, are searching to mediate their identity and take pride in their diverse culture. Amra won the 2009 Melbourne Prize for Literature's Civic Choice Award for her debut novel, The Good Daughter, which was re-released as Sabiha's Dilemma. The anthology Amra co-edited, Growing Up Muslim in Australia, was shortlisted for the 2015 Children's Book Council of the Year Awards, and her memoir, Things Nobody Knows But Me, was shortlisted for the 2020 National Biography Award. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Amra.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to connect with you, Jessica.
Yeah, we normally sort of stick to one topic, but with you, I had to go for two, which is firstly growing up Muslim in Australia, which as from an anthology perspective, as well as your knowledge on grants. So I'd like to begin with what prompted the idea behind growing up Muslim in Australia, and if you could tell viewers about it.
So my friend Demet Divaroran and I don't know how it happened, but we joined this Muslim leadership group. For me, it was soon after my daughter was born and I needed to get out of the house. And I thought, this is a great opportunity for me to rethink who I am, because I was just a mother. And during that leadership group, which was led by our local council, we embarked on a project where we did what a Muslim woman looks like, because we were looking at this room where there were, 12 or 13 Muslim women who were all of all different backgrounds, and you couldn't pick what a Muslim woman looks like. Some wear hijab, some don't. Some wear niqab, some don't. Some are like me, blonde and blue-eyed, because I'm from Bosnia. And so we did this project that was a community project. It was funded by state government. And it was just an opportunity to sort of share it with the community and to break stereotypes. We had it translated into Arabic and Vietnamese, some of the extracts, photos. And because we were both authors and we were both represented by the same agency at that time, by Curtis Brown, our agents were like, you should do something about this. There's an opportunity here. We need something like this in the traditional publishing world. And because Demet and I had sort of both started out as young adult authors, we were like, well, this is where we need to put the energy in the young adult space. We need something for young people to read about what it's like to grow up Muslim, and to share and break stereotypes, and just to sort of start that conversation. And so we pitched Growing Up Muslim in Australia, it was originally, so we pitched it to a few publishers, and we got picked up by Allen and Unwin. And so in the traditional publishing world, you write like a 2-page pitch, justifying why you think there's a space for this, looking at comp titles, looking at potential readership, and then also for us justifying why we should be the editors, why we were qualified. Well, qualified's a bit of a big word, but why we were the ones who should try and get this anthology off the ground. So it was about our networks and our opportunity. We already knew people in this space because of our backgrounds, and we had the pitch accepted, but it was based on us getting a certain number of authors who were known in the publishing world. And then when we secured them, then it was fully greenlit, and we had the go-ahead and started the process of, getting people to submit. So it wasn't an open call. It was basically people we invited.
Okay. And why did you decide on an anthology format?
Well, it was just more about people writing in their own voices. So we sort of wanted different people sharing their stories. And one of the things that we were really wanted to represent was the different experiences of being Muslim. So not just in terms of cultural background, and that is a factor. There's something like 60 countries that you know, Muslim.
Majority.
Yeah, or have Muslim people. But we also wanted to sort of demonstrate the different experiences. So there's Alawi Muslim, there's Sunni, there's Sufi. We had lesbian contributor. I was just searching for that word. Contributor writing about what it was like to come out in a Muslim family. We had someone who was an atheist who gave up their faith. We had women who put on the hijab, women who took off the hijab, men who faced significant racism and discrimination, especially after September 11. You know, experiences of masculinity and that sort of toxic masculinity in terms of being attacked and stuff. So we wanted to have this really wide spectrum of experiences and just people telling their stories for young people to read and engage with and just sort of think about, well, what is it that we all have in common? And that was one of the things that really came through in the reviews that we loved, which is, yeah, we're all of different backgrounds. We're all from different races. We're all from different, you know, genders and sexuality. But the experience of coming of age is common. It is the same.
It's universal. Yeah.
It's so universal. And so that's what we wanted to put out there, and that's what we did successfully.
And overall, was it a positive story of growing up Muslim in Australia?
It was, but we didn't shy away from, you know, like the contributors did not shy away from telling the hard stories.
As well as, okay.
Yeah, so in terms of
hear that.
Parents who have traditional values, who have expectations of you marrying into the faith, of you being a certain way, when you're up against, you know, like even the fact that if you're Alawi, which is a different type of a Muslim, the way that there is prejudice by other Muslim communities. You know, just like any religion, we know that there are so many different facets of Christianity, and that, you know, while they are similar, they are also very different and unique. And we know that if you come from a different cultural background, just because you might be an Orthodox Christian, if you're Serb, if you're Greek, you know, you will have different experiences in different ways of manifesting that identity. So that was also something that was, you know, showing through. There was no shying away from the you know, the themes and the reality of it.
But in terms of Australia being a good place to grow up Muslim, was that, did we seem a multicultural, successful multicultural society?
I mean, it comes in waves, and that's what comes from the anthology that was interesting. It depends on what's going on in the world. So there are waves of Islamophobia depending on the rest of the world. So one of our contributors were talking about September 11 and how that created a wave of Islamophobia, and it changed the experiences for them in terms of growing up, and it changed what it meant. Like, you know, personally for me, I was Yugoslav for most of my childhood. And then suddenly in 1992, when I was 15 years old, I was Bosnian.
Yeah.
I was Bosnian Muslim. So that meant something else for my identity. So when you have these sort of visible identities, it depends on what's going on in the world. It is, you know, like depends on which part of the world you are in. I live in St Albans, let me give a shout out, in Melbourne's western suburbs, and this is a very multicultural suburb. And so, you know, in my part of the world, this is normal. It is normal to have parents who are migrants, who have these expectations that are very gendered, you know, an expectation that I will marry into the faith, that I will, you know, have children, and I did. So, you know, it's, there are good and there are mostly good, because we are very fortunate in Australia in the opportunities, and most of our parents or grandparents in some instances came here for a better life, and we did get that. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, that's good.
So, you know, it is positive.
Yeah. I'm in Western Sydney. Shout out to Western Sydney. Where
I lived in Western Sydney. I was a little girl, and I grew up at University of Western Sydney.
I'm near Bankstown, which near,
yeah. I went to university with us in Bankstown.
Yeah. Okay, so it was easy to get a publishing deal. Was it also, with that behind you, was it very easy to approach writers to say, would you like to contribute? And just in terms of someone else who might be thinking about embarking on a project like this, how did you approach them? Were you quite, you spelled out what it would entail, what you would require from them? Would they be paid for their contribution?
Yeah. Well, always has to be a payment. So if you are, organising an anthology, thankfully, when you have a traditional publisher behind you, they are paying. So they pay us as editors, and they paid, they had a contributor fee that they set. The publisher specified, had the specifications in terms of 12 contributors between 3,000 to 5,000 words. We were then sort of looking at a variety of stories and focusing more on that coming of age and more on that process. So we initially created a template and a letter outlining all of the information and why we were approaching them in particular. And that's the thing, if you are approaching a publisher, that's what you have to do. And if you are approaching contributors, that's what you want to do also. It's like, why are you approaching them? And so we invited them to pitch what they would write. And so then they would get back to us and go, well, I was thinking I would write this and I would write that. We had a few instances where things were a little bit similar, so we just kind of tweaked and we're like, oh, can you instead do this so that we make sure that and that spectrum of stories. They had a deadline about when to submit. So when the initial submissions occurred, Dem and I did the editing. And so depending on where the writers were on their writing journey was how much, editing would be done. We had one piece that was 9,000 words that we kind of broke apart and restitched.
Yeah.
We had, like all these, and we kind of, because I've been using that anthology to teach memoir writing, I realized that we created a very stylized structure in terms of how the pieces begin. So they start with this very vivid opening scene that might even be out of chronological order. And we have a linking sentence that takes us back to where they are starting the story. And so if anyone is interested in memoir pieces and how to write them, it's a good deconstruction method to go to memoir pieces people have written and actually look at how have they put them together to help you write your own.
Yeah. And if people would like you to teach them, do you have group classes, one-on-ones? Where can they find out about that?
Well, I've mostly been working with, like people booking me, but I do also offer mentorship. So I have worked with memoir writers one-on-one to mentor them. And in terms of that mentorship experience, it's providing that editing experience, but it's also kind of providing the big picture. It's providing that support. It's giving the support in terms of the publishing industry. So I had one mentor where they were working on a whole draft and then were looking to pitch, so I helped them with the pitch. I helped write them a support letter for grant that they were successful at getting. So it's just kind of that big picture. And the thing about memoir, it's so hard to step away. It's so hard. Like I found that when I was writing my own memoir, it only took 5 years. And then I got a grant and I got a mentor. Because while I was writing my memoir, I was also starting my teaching career and working full-time as a teacher. So I really needed someone to make me accountable, to sort of support me, to hold my hand and to also help me see that big picture. And so I was fortunate that I got Alice Pung, the amazing writer who's now one of my very dear and close friends. And so that's a great way of and then there are places that you can look for mentors. So I'm like with Writers Victoria. I also do it independently.
Right.
Australian Society of Authors or any writing organisation in whatever state people happen to be in, a great resource to look for mentors.
Okay. Okay. Now, just going back to the final question on anthologies is, how do you promote and do marketing for a book with multiple contributors?
Mhm.
Do you get
So-
everyone to amplify it?
Well, when we sort of were doing it, I don't know, I don't feel like social media was as big. So, the publisher created some social media assets for us. I was really excited, like where, they gave me like a banner. I was like, oh my gosh, banner, this is so cool. Like, in those days where these were not easy to make yourself, you were like, oh,
You would have needed a designer. It was pre-Canva.
That's right. So we really, so they sort of shared some assets and stuff. But the publisher did most of the promotion, and it was just kind of organising. So there were launches in different states, trying to get the different contributors coming to the launches, and then organising events and getting the contributors out there. So of course there were some contributors who didn't have the time or weren't really into doing the promotion side of it. There were others who really wanted to step forward and do the promotion. But, these days you would expect, like I've been now a part of many anthologies. The latest one was Teachers, an anthology. And, so now you would expect to have a hashtag that everyone uses, to have social media assets that everyone's sort of using, that you're trying to promote beforehand in terms of the pre-launch and the pre-orders, and then after the launch, and that you're also looking at creating media assets with reviews once reviews start flowing in, to sort of do the endorsement and that social proof.
Are anthologies a popular format?
They are, like they're still so well. Look, interestingly, I mean, it says a lot about the traditional publishing world. That was my biggest moneymaker for a while, because that anthology was being picked up by schools, and so as the editors, we would also, because they divided the percentages between the editors and the contributors. And then also you get PLR and ELR, so you get public lending rights and electronic lending rights. And so the more schools and the more libraries that have a book, the more that you get in terms of those rights. And so with it being in so many schools and having educational lending rights, there was a nice little income coming from that for us as editors. But they still seem very popular. There's lots of anthologies that are still published and sort of thematically. So you need to think in terms of theme and in terms of what is it that you are trying to address that's not out there. What is it that you're trying to connect with readers out there? What's a story that they sort of need? When you're
topical, you can do something really topical that society is discussing and debating. Why did you say at the start that it was your biggest money earner from books for a while, and interestingly what that says about traditional publishing?
Well, traditional publishing, you get an advance and then you have to sell enough.
Sell it out,
and then to earn royalties. And so none of my other books have I sold enough to pay back the royalties, whereas that one,
because it was in schools,
paid back enough to the advance that we got as the editors, and then all the other residuals that we got from it.
Got you. Okay. Now, that's a great segue to the question that I would like to ask you. You're so prolific. You've written many books, and you were telling me before we hit record that you've asked for your rights back for your books from traditional publishers. Can you just tell us a bit about that? Like, was it easy or hard to do that, and why?
So the books that I've gotten back so far were easy. So there were 2 romance novels that were when the digital first started. So there were all these traditional publishers who started digital first publishing arms that didn't really take off because they were trying to first. So they were basically only publishing digital formats of the books.
That seems weird.
Yeah, it was when the ebook market was really big, and it was when indie authors were really killing it in that space. And so the traditional publishers were trying to kind of find their foothold in that space, and they were trying to do it in the model that indie authors were doing it. And so they would do digital first. It was about, you would get, I think, 40% of the royalty, so you would get a higher royalty than you would. So when you are traditionally published for a paperback, you usually only get 10 or 12 or 15% of the sale price. So they gave you a higher percentage, but they only published in a digital format. And then they were trying to do all that online promotion, and they were trying to do the magnet, the reader magnet, which a lot of indie authors do, which is about having a short story that is offered and get people to subscribe and to read and then to sort of continue into that world. It was a spectacular fail because that model does not work in that traditional publishing space, and they were kind of just throwing spaghetti on the wall from the publisher that I signed with. They were just publishing anything, just kind of seeing what would happen. I made $5.
You made $5.
I made $5
on 2 books.
$5 each. Yay!
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! So you said, "Hey,
that contract I signed, it was for them to own the rights for 5 years. So I just waited for the 5 years to pass, and because the publisher was closed, I just had to follow back and track back some of the links because they were still showing up in some places, even though they weren't available for sale. They were showing, so I just had to make sure that the publisher removed them. So then I got the right.
Do that when the publishers close down. It's hard enough to do that when they're open because they have to help an author out.
It was Momentum, and I think that they were part of Pan Macmillan, so they were still a part of a big publisher.
Oh, they'd been absorbed.
Yeah. So it was just a matter of kind of, contacting them and going, hey, I'm going to take this over. You need to remove it because I didn't want any issues when I published it myself. My first novel, which I republished as Sabiha's Dilemma and as the first book in a 3-book series, I also just waited and then just, was like, okay, I want my rights back. Contacted them, so you do a reversion letter, and they just confirm, yeah. They had some copies in the warehouse, so they were like, do you want to buy the copies? I can't remember what it's called.
The books back.
Yeah, so I bought them back, at a very cheap price because they just wanted the cost of the printing, and because they do offset printing overseas, the cost per book is like $3. So I, for $100, I bought all of the copies that they had.
The cost is only $3 a book
at that time. I mean, this was in 2010, and it was offset printing. So offset.
Yeah. Okay. So you got $5 for each book in royalties. Why? What?
Why did I get that much?
No. So you got $5 in royalties for these 2 books. Why, from a commercial point of view, did you want to get them back?
Well, I thought they're just sitting there. I can publish them myself and get some money, and I did. I got something like nearly $1,000 for those 2 books by publishing them myself. So I've now reimagined myself. My new reincarnation is
as a self-published author.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking of it as a small press. I wanted to sort of make it a bit bigger. I'm hoping to do what you do one day, darling, and help others. Yeah, and so I thought of it in terms of, if I am a small press, what is it that I'm contributing? So again, that mindset of what is your point of difference? What is it that you are doing? So for me, it was about doing own voices and doing people who don't get the opportunity to get represented. And I focused on, because I'm a teacher, on accessibility, and so I publish all of my books in, wait for it, ebook, paperback, hardcover, dyslexic font, audiobook,
Yes, I replied to your comment on LinkedIn about audiobooks the other day.
Large print.
Yeah, good on you. That's fantastic. Okay, now the other part of your expertise is grants, and I would love to ask you about that. Is a grant very hard to come by for a book project?
There are organisations that you can apply for in grants. So usually every state government has literature or arts grants, and then there's also the council grants. The issue is so many people applying, and there is limited money. And so I have been successful at receiving grants, and I've also assessed grants, and I've also mentored people in writing grants and taught courses about applying. So the thing is that there is so much need, and there is very limited amount of money. So, for example, when I was assessing, we kept whittling because you do, first of all, you get all of them, and you get a marking sheet, and you go through and you score where you think the grants are. Then based on that score, it's divided into an A and a B list, and the B list is put aside. But anyone can make an argument why one of the authors on the B list should go into the A list. And so
anyone assessing the grants can make
assessing the grants, yeah, where you're like, no, that person should not be in the B list. I want them to, and so they put back in the A's. And then you just keep debating, and you keep, like everyone in the room is so passionate because we are writers and we love writing. And so we read these grants and we fall in love with the projects, and we want to, we advocate for projects. And then it just becomes this process of whittling and trying to, and then it gets to a point where people are like, I'm not giving up this one. This one has to get through. I believe.
It's life-changing for the person who receives the grant.
Because for me, it was life-changing when I got my first grant.
What was that?
2010, I had my first novel published, and my first novel was a dream run, babe. A dream run. I had top agent pick me up. I was shortlisted for an unpublished manuscript, so I got media attention before it was even published. We submitted to 5 publishers. I had 2 offers. We accepted one offer. I won a prize after it was published. I had beautiful reviews. And then the global financial crisis happened, and it all just went quiet.
What impact did that have in terms of sales, book sales?
It had an impact in terms of book sales and also international sales. So up until that point, the publisher had really been successful in getting international book sales. And my book was just that crappy timing. And it just kind of, even though it had all of these positive things, and so when my book was published, I had a 4-month-old daughter. I had that beautiful, when you're traditionally published, you've got those 6 weeks where just the promotion, the advertising, the, attention. You are a star, darling, a star. And then it goes.
Yeah.
And so I was at home with my baby battling motherhood. I had postnatal depression. My husband had to drag me out of bed and, go on leave to take care of me, to get me to be functional.
Sorry.
Yeah. And so I felt myself sinking. And then also there's something that happens when your dream comes true, because my whole life up until that point had been about being a published author.
Yeah.
My whole life. And I got it. My dream came true. But the life change did not come with it. The income to transition me into a writer did not come with it. The regular life still continued. The paying bills still continued. And so I applied for a grant for what was the second book in my series now. And I got it. I got $12,000, which, even now is a lot of money. But at that time,
yeah,
was, and that meant that I could put my daughter in childcare. That meant I could get my writing space back. That meant I could dig myself out of my postnatal depression and try and get my writing and my career back on track in terms of in that life. My publisher did not want that second book, which was the sequel to my first one.
Did not think it was going to sell enough units.
Because that's the thing. If you sell a series to a publisher, if the first or even the second book don't succeed, they're not continuing. They're like, no, we're done. Good day.
So what happened? Did they publish it?
So I sat on it. I tried. Actually, no, what happened was my agent said there's really no point trying anywhere else because you've written it as a sequel. And because one publisher has the first book, no one else wants the second book. So I was stuck. I was like, oh.
That's awful.
Yeah. So then I had a romance novel that I'd written. So then we tried reimagining me as a romance author, as May Archer. And so that's when I did the digital first, which didn't succeed. And then I got cranky and I went, you know what, if I'm going to write something, I'm only going to write my passion projects. Because then if they don't sell or, I'm not going to chase anymore what I think will sell.
Yeah.
So I just started writing my passion project, which was my memoir. It took me 5 years. And then, even that was a story. Do you want to hear that story?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my agent submitted it to publishers and there was a bit of a lukewarm response. And she said, okay, I think I'm done. And I said, I think I'm not. I'd like to continue. And she said, go for it. So I did. And I submitted that myself to smaller publishers and I got my own publishing deal.
Did it win an award?
And it did win an award. So, like the publishing industry is brutal. This is why you need a variety of skills and a variety of things that you can do. Tenacity, you just got to keep going, and just keep fighting.
The irony is that it is such a brutal industry and it affects, I think, a group of people who are among the most emotionally attuned and sensitive. And writing is so deeply personal that when there's a lukewarm response to your memoir, it's like a lukewarm response to you. And I say that as the author of memoirs that were rejected. Yeah. Gosh. You're so well placed to be coaching people and telling people, and I can see why self-publishing, just, to take all the angst out of it. That's why I love Hembury Books, because we don't gatekeep books. We are not in the business of saying no to books. We want to publish books. And the business model allows that if the author's willing to invest in the cost of producing their book.
Yep.
Because writing a book is a huge amount of work. And I see it as like taking out all the manuscripts that are sitting in people's drawers around Australia and getting them out there. And my gosh, the talent, like I was listening to one this morning and I was like, cannot wait to publish this. So back to genres, is there like a good resource to find them in, like the national ones and the state ones? Are there websites and things?
So grants, there's things like if you join Arts Hub, that's a membership thing, like a lot more grants available. And those are, they might be specific, like, there's a lot of philanthropists.
Yes.
Grants and stuff. But for us as writers, for example, for me in Victoria, there's Creative Victoria. There's my local council that I've gotten grants for. There's Australia Council that you can get grants from. Copyright Australia. Australian Society of Authors also have some sort of services and some grants. And then there are also organisations, so that for example, one organisation which does like war memorials or war stories. So then there's also all these, like the Historical Society. They have some grants, I think. So then there's also ones specific within, like if there's a big organisation and they sort of have a grant within it. I usually what I recommend is that people join mailing lists of anything that they come across, and that way they just start sending you emails about when they're portals are opening, when their times are opening. So Australia Council and Creative Victoria, they also have information sessions where people can go to. They also provide advice where you can speak to the arts officers and talk through your application, and they can give you sort of tips on how to refine. And then once you submit, and if you are not successful, you have the opportunity to get feedback and to find out why and how you can improve and resubmit. And, you know, my first grant, of course, I got everything easy the first time, right? The grant that I got for my memoir, I applied 3 times, and the third time I was successful.
Yeah, okay. And do you get it for a particular part, like the writing part? I've got one client who's had a grant for the writing part, and she's just waiting to hear back whether she'll get a grant for the publishing costs.
Yeah, so you need to divide it up. And if you are applying simultaneously, so for example, for me, I've applied simultaneously for Creative Victoria and for Australia Council for the same project, then you need to specify which part of the grant is for the Creative Victoria and what that is paying for, what those costs are for, and then what the costs are for Australia Council. So, one might be for the first draft, or one might be for a residency, one for writing costs. Some of them cover childcare costs. I don't know if all of them do now. At one point, there were only some of them that, would fund childcare costs. But, that's a really important one for those of us, who do a lot of that. I'm not fortunate when my daughter is older, but in those early years, getting that first grant when she was 4 months, actually, no, she was like 10 months, because it was when the postnatal depression was at its height, changed my life, because I could actually pay for her to go into childcare. But usually it's also just for paying for the costs of not working.
Exactly.
So instead of working 5 days, I'm going to work 3 days. I'm applying for 2 days for it to cover my wage, to subsidise
So you should apply for grants when you have the idea for a book, not when you finish the book or you're halfway through.
Ideally, your best chance of getting a grant is for the writing process.
Okay.
But also having a sample that you can submit of that project, because what you really need is an advocate. You need someone who's going to read this project, is going to read this extract, and it's going to connect with them. And you can submit an extract of like a previously published piece or a previously published book. But I think that the biggest chance of success is for the project that you're actually asking for.
Sure. Does it take a long time to find out? And are there certain times of year when the grants close?
Yeah, so usually Australia Council only does it twice a year. I think every March and September. And so you've got to check the times. So usually, I've already got in my diary grants for next year that I'm applying for a project that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I've already got those dates in my calendar, and months before I'm going to start the process of writing my grant application. Also, if you can get support letters. So if, for example, when I was wanting Alice to mentor me, getting her to write a support letter, for that first grant, I had my agent write a support letter. I had the publisher write a support letter. Also get, people in the publishing industry that if a bookseller who's like, I believe in this, I think that, I can promote this. Even I've had people apply where, getting writing group members to write a letter, Yeah,
it makes sense.
Yeah. It's just sort of trying to get people, if you can, people who are in the industry carry a little bit more weight. And unfortunately, these days, a lot of the grants privilege more traditional publishing. I don't know, I'm hoping that things are changing, but I do find that the traditional publishing industry kind of has a bit of a sneer still towards those of us who are going outside of their hallowed ground.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't support their business model to go outside. But the publishers are not the ones deciding on who gets the grants. So
No, but it's mostly authors and people who are in the publishing.
It's like with the literature festivals, some are a bit closed door. Yeah, I see. But I guess also the publishing companies would be very happy because they can scarcely pay advances. So it would make the prospect more attractive to an author if they could get a grant and a small.
Yeah. And there are some publishers that don't pay an advance, and so like you can still get that contract from them, and then make that as part of your argument, where you'll only get a royalty as they make sales.
Yeah,
that's also what's changing with publishing industries now. Advances are shrinking, opportunities are shrinking, and then also now there are a lot of smaller publishers who don't pay in advance, and they will only pay you royalties as you make sales.
So, but you would start to get royalties from the moment your book is sold, because you wouldn't have to earn out your royalties. Is that what you mean?
And you would only get what it sells based on how many copies it sells, then you get royalties for that.
Yeah, okay.
Usually twice a year.
What would be your top tip for winning a grant? Are there any topics in particular that tend to perform well?
No, I don't think it's topics. I think it's just more about making your case. Okay. It's this crazy thing of you have to be like, my book is going to change the world. Yep. And you have to somehow think of it outside of yourself.
Yep.
And what is it that you are contributing to the world and to the world of publishing? What is it that is about your story, your novel, whatever, that is going to, connect with something? Mm-hmm. And then, also if you write it as if it's a pitch for a traditional publisher. So, do the comp titles, do justification in terms of, well, there is a readership because of this and that. Mm-hmm. Or do it in terms of if you have had some success and you can prove that you have some readership, or you can make some connections in terms of, your book is about hiking and you are connected with the hiking society, and that you can put it in their bookstores and that you can, connect with them to do talks. So you need to, in one sense, also try and think of yourself as an entrepreneur. It's a terrible thing where it's you're,
it's fun.
It's fun, but it's just a business,
career.
When you're traditionally published, though, you don't have control over any of those things.
No, but that's so
that you do. And the other thing is, be careful of saying things like, I'll organise a launch. With us in Melbourne, everyone was like, I'll organise a launch with the Wheeler Centre. And it's like, sweetie, you don't actually know anyone at the Wheeler Centre. You're just throwing this as a name. If you're going to say something in terms of you have a connection or a network, you have to actually justify that.
Yeah.
So, it has to be that you have a support letter from that person, or that you can, say, I have worked with them, or I have done this. And so don't make those empty sort of claims. Think of it as, these people don't know you from a bar of soap, and you are trying to justify them why this is a good bet, and why this will contribute to the publishing industry and also contribute to you as a writer in terms of you as a practitioner, you in terms of your career, and you in terms of being able to use this as a step in your career.
I see.
Also at the end of the day, grants, it's this weird thing of success begets success. If you've got grants or residencies, then you are the writer, and you are, in the
right now.
Yeah. Yes. And it's so weird because it's I've gone through, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years now. So I've been through a lot of cycles. I've been through the ups and the downs. And I'm like, when I'm so hot right now, and then I'm so cold, so icy, nobody wants to come near me.
You're always the same person and the same talented writer. And what all this tells me is that you're really good at writing, and that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, and tenacity.
Tenacity you must have.
You've seen this yourself, I'm sure, where, through our networks, we see so many people on this writing journey, and it becomes it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you just see sort of people dropping off, and, falling.
Understand, if you cannot get your book published, it becomes discouraging. And if you cannot get 3 books published, that is very discouraging. I saw a post the other day by someone I just assumed was loving life as a successful author saying he's got 3 unpublished novels and he's stopped writing, and I find that really sad.
That's what was happening to me. I was basically having ideas and then pruning them and going, I don't think I can sell this. I don't think
you doubt yourself as well, because I knew with my first book, if I continued to get rejections, I would lose faith in myself. So I just had to stop and say, okay, this is the point, no more. I am up to 105 or whatever it was, but it was a lot. And that was, and everyone has a line, I think, where you then, you know, okay, well, Amra, thank you. You are a wealth of knowledge. Thanks for sharing all of those amazing tips with us. That's going to be invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.